In this video, we're going to look at how the nervous system is used to control breathing. The main respiratory control center in the brain is located in the brainstem itself, specifically in the pons and the medulla oblongata. There are two places in the medulla oblongata that are known to control respiration, and then one place in the pons. In the medulla oblongata, we have something called the ventral respiratory group and then something called the dorsal respiratory group. Ventral and dorsal is regarding their placement within the medulla oblongata. But both of these are nuclei, or groups of neuron cell bodies that are controlling something with respiration. The ventral respiratory group is more commonly referred to by its abbreviation, VRG. Likewise, dorsal respiratory group is more commonly referred to as DRG. In the pons, we have the pontine respiratory group, which you would think we would call the PRG, but we don't. We call it the pontine respiratory group. Like the VRG and DRG, there are nuclei, groups of neuron cell bodies, regulating respiration also here. Scientists are still working on the unique functions of these different nuclei. There is still debate and research going on, so I don't want to actually give you any misinformation. So we're just going to say that these areas do control respiration, but we're not going to go into the details. There are other areas of the brain that control breathing. Go ahead and hold your breath. That's conscious control of breathing, right? Your brainstem is involved with your everyday subconscious breathing, whereas your cerebral cortex is involved with your conscious control of breathing. When you meditate, you change how you breathe consciously, right? Or when you jump in the water and hold your breath, all of those are examples of using your cerebral cortex to control breathing. The hypothalamus and limbic system are also involved with regulating breathing. These systems are involved with regulating breathing in response to some of our deep-seated drives and emotions, and pain and changes in temperature. So looking at one example, when we feel excited or when we have that fight or flight emergency response activated, the hypothalamus will send signals to the respiratory group in the brainstem, increasing our respiratory rate. So you've probably noticed when you're excited or in that emergency mode, you're breathing more to get more oxygen to the cells of your body, like your muscles and your brain, so that you can run and think your way out of the situation. When it comes to nervous system control of breathing, one thing that we do know a lot about is how sensory neurons are sending signals to the brain. And these sensory neurons are sending signals about things happening in the body related to respiration. For example, chemoreceptors, which are measuring things like oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH levels in the blood. Mechanoreceptors, which, for example, might be measuring how stretched our lungs are. And then other types of receptors, for example, irritant receptors, like when we inhale smoke. Let's take a look at these. Chemoreceptors are neurons that are sensitive to certain chemicals. These chemicals, when they activate them, the neuron will send a signal to the respiratory center of the brain. There are two main locations for these chemoreceptors. We have central chemoreceptors, which are located in the brain, specifically in the medulla oblongata, and then we have peripheral chemoreceptors, which are located in the carotid arteries and the aortic arch. Central chemoreceptors are called central because they're located in the central nervous system, and the peripheral chemoreceptors are called peripheral because they're found in the peripheral nervous system. Both types of chemoreceptors, regardless of location, are sensitive to oxygen, carbon dioxide, and pH, but it's mostly pH that's activating them. When there's a decrease in a pH of a body fluid, this means that the body fluid is too acidic, which means there's too much carbon dioxide, which means we need to exhale more. The more we exhale, the more CO2 we get rid of the body, and that means more acid that we're getting rid of from the body. Because don't forget, CO2 reacts with water to form carbonic acid. So these chemoreceptors, when they detect this drop in pH, they stimulate the respiratory center in the brainstem to initiate contraction of the diaphragm and contraction of the intercostals, increasing the rate and depth of breathing, allowing more carbon dioxide to be expelled. Once we get rid of that CO2, the pH can go up a little bit, back to normal. Likewise, When these chemoreceptors detect an increase in pH or a more alkaline pH, what that means is we need to exhale less. We need to keep some extra carbon dioxide in the body in order to get more acid to stay in the body to bring that pH down a little bit. The chemoreceptors, when they detect this increase in pH, they send a signal to the respiratory center, inhibiting contraction of the diaphragm and inhibiting contraction of the intercostals, which will decrease the rate and depth of breathing, which will allow more carbon dioxide to be retained in the body. Mechanoreceptors can also play a role with regulating breathing. Most of the mechanoreceptors are pulmonary stretch receptors, which are located in the smooth muscle of the bronchi and bronchioles, and they become activated when the lungs overstretch, when there's too much air going in there. These mechanoreceptors then send signals to the respiratory center telling it to decrease inhalation. We're inhaling too much, we get too much stretch. Another type of receptor that can send signals to the brain to help regulate breathing are irritant receptors. So as the name suggests, they respond to irritants. Really, these are just another type of chemoreceptor, but we don't call them that because they are responding to chemical irritants. So let's look at some examples of chemical irritants that can activate these irritant receptors. You might not have ever heard of acrolein, but you are familiar with where it's found. So acrolein is an airway irritant that's specifically formulated in tear gas, or if you will, riot control agents. The chemicals that are in tear gas and riot control agents do a lot more than just make your eyes irritated. They also irritate the respiratory tract. So if you can't see because your eyes are so irritated, and if you're coughing a lot, obviously that is going to be a deterrent from whatever is going on, the riot, whatever. We're probably familiar with the fact that vehicle exhaust and smoke contain chemical irritants. These activate these irritant receptors, sending a signal to the respiratory center, which will then activate changes in breathing, usually something like coughing, to get rid of the irritant.